Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year, and I hope you all had a lovely Christmas. And welcome to today's meeting of the Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Board. My name is Councillor Asghar Khan, and I will be chairing today's meeting. As you know, this meeting is a broadcast on Leeds City Council YouTube channel, and I warmly welcome anybody who is tuned through the YouTube channel. We have a busy agenda ahead of today, and we will be looking in detail at the finance report on our year budget performance and the future budget for 2023-24. We therefore is a significant financial challenges, and also looking at performance and key performance indicators for the council services that fall within this board remit. And lastly, the latest update to the council's best city ambition strategy plan. At this point, I would like to invite everyone to formally introduce themselves. Before I do that, can I welcome Councillor Andrew Carter to our board, and he will be replacing Councillor Matthew Robinson. And can we thank Councillor Robinson for his service on the board? And I will now go around the room to introduce board members from my left.
Hello, my name's Andy Parnham and I'm councillor for Armley.
Good morning, it's Councillor Gower Almas from Beeson Holbeck Ward.
Councillor Sharon Burt, Middleton Park Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Eleanor Thompson from Guiseley and Rawdon Ward.
Morning all, Councillor Hannah Bithell from Kirkstall.
Councillor Tom Hinchcliffe, Bramley and Stanley Ward.
Sorry. Councillor Winkage, representing Morley South.
Councillor Diane Chapman from Rothwell Ward.
Councillor Sam Firth from the Harewood Ward.
Councillor Andrew Carter, Carvely and Farsley Ward.
Rob Clayton, I'm the Principal Scrutiny Advisor to the board.
Thank you, Rob. And can I ask the officers to introduce themselves as well, please?
Good morning, Emma Camillo Price, Intelligence and Policy Officer.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Jonathan Pryor. I'm Deputy Leader of Council and Executive Member for Economy, Culture and Education.
Good morning, I'm Eve Roothouse. I'm Chief Officer for Culture and Economy.
Good morning, my name's Andy Dobman and I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer.
Good morning, I'm Victoria Bradshaw. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Council.
Morning, Marianna Pexton, Director of Strategy and Resources.
Morning, everybody. Councillor Deborah Cooper. I am the other Deputy Leader at Leeds City Council and Exec Board Member for Resources.
Thank you for your introduction. Moving on to agenda then, can I ask Rob to take us through the first 5 items of the business, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just run through them in order. Item 1 is appeals, and there are no appeals against refusal of inspection of documents. Item 2 is exclusions of the public, and there are no items that have been identified for exclusion from the public domain. Item 3 is late items, Chair, and there are no late items. Item 4 is declarations of interest, and I will pause briefly under the Leeds City Council's Code of Conduct. I'll pause briefly to allow members to raise any, and I'll take silence as none. I think that's none. And then item 5 is apologies, Chair, and we have no apologies today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. It's good to see a full house for the Scrutiny Board meeting. We move to item number 6 now, the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 11th of December 2023. Do members accept these minutes are true and correct record? And we'll go through page by page for any matters rising. On page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, and finally page 15. Are there any matters rising from those minutes? Nope. Rob, do you have any items to pick up, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, minute 58, which was the West Yorkshire Joint Services item that we considered last time. Members should have received contact details that were requested in relation to trading standards and actually joint services more generally. Minute 60 on corporate risk refers to a letter that Councillor Khan and I will be sending to the other Scrutiny Board chairs. Just to note that's in production and will be sent as soon as possible this week. And then lastly, minute 61, contact centre data. Members should have received that on Friday, I hope, and that would hopefully facilitate question and answer on that, should you need it, at the site visit that we're carrying out later in the month. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, we will now move to agenda item number 7, which is a financial report month 7. I think we are aware of the budget pressure we are facing as a local authority, and this provides the latest update for the board. Victoria, do you want to take us through, please, this report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The position was reported to Executive Board in December and was the month 7 position as at October. This is reports noting an overspend of 35.3 million on the net revenue budget. The position is a worsening position, and this is mainly around the Children's and Families Directorate, where we're still seeing increased pressure around external residential placements. There is also pressure around education, health and care plans and the travel implications of that. The other directorates are forecasting overspend positions apart from City Dev, and they're being managed within the directorates. And we do need to flag that there is a pressure within adults and health, which at the moment is being managed within the directorate, but obviously it depends on the winter that we're going through at the moment. What I would say on the revenue budget is that we've put in tighter controls since Christmas. So we've put in additional controls around vacancy management and recruitment. The non-essential spend has been enforced harder with further controls around travel. We've reduced controls around agency and overtime, and we've also put in action around purchase cards. There's further work to be completed around the grants that we receive from the council and how we can use those, and around fees and charges which we're undertaking at the moment. On the HRA, we are forecasting an overspend of 1.3 million, and we are looking at how we can manage that through the repairs that we're undertaking. We've also reported an overspend on the dedicated schools grant, and we've got an in-year pressure of 900,000. That will be managed through the DSG balances that we've brought forward, which after managing that and using some of the funding that needs to be returned to mainstream schools, we'd have a balance on the DSG for 6.6 million, but we know we've got pressures coming through on the DSG going forward. which that will be required to mitigate. The budget does assume that the Directorate savings plans will be implemented. Within the children's and families position is that there is a shortfall on the implementation of some of those savings plans, and that's detailed in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Victoria. Before bring board members in, does Councillor Cooper want to comment now, or does she want to wait after the discussion?
I'm happy to wait until scrutiny members have made their comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Faith.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the introduction, Victoria. Given that this report was written in month 7 and we're now in month 10, it's quite significantly out of date. And obviously at the time, particularly on children and families, there'd been a £5 million increase in the overspend just in 4 weeks. And obviously we're now 8 weeks on from when this report was put in. Could you just give us a brief overview of where we currently stand? And also whether, given that the forecast overspend on the general fund is regularly increasing, what is sort of the worst case scenario of where we may be by the end of the year?
Thank you, Councillor Firth. The financial position is forecast to the end of the year, but as you say, we are still seeing pressures coming in the Children's and Families Directorate. That will be reported to February Executive Board, and we're just pulling all the information together. But we are seeing an increase in the number of children who need placing within the council's provision, and unfortunately at the moment that is mainly in the external residential, but that report will come to Executive Board in February. Thank you.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Fair?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Bethel and Councillor Carter.
Thanks, Chair. It talks in the report about a budget monitoring process, and I just wondered if you could put a bit of meat on the bones in terms of what that looks like. Is it face-to-face? Is it written reporting? How does that work? Thank you.
So every month, the business partners within financial services meet with the budget holders, and we've risk rated those budget holder areas to red, amber and green. Red is where those budget holders are managing where budgets where there's demand pressures and where there's volatility in the expenditure that comes through those budgets, and those are monitored on a monthly basis very closely. Then we have those budgets that we've classified as amber, where there is some volatility and some demand pressures, but not to the significance of the red budget holder areas. And then we have green, where it's mainly staffing, so the volatility is less. The business partners update that, as I've said, on a monthly position, and we review that through the internal finance group, and then we go to the wider group within financial challenge and to corporate leadership team on a monthly basis with the position. The budget holders work with the business partners on how those pressures can be mitigated and what can we do in year, and those are reported in the report around the actions that are taken, and then obviously around the savings plans, the action plans have been put together. There's robust monitoring at that point on those and around the achievement. There is forecasting to the end of the year, which is happening around those demand budgets. But we are finding ourselves in an unprecedented year where the demand pressures in social care are significant, and there are action plans being developed with those services around managing that pressure into the new financial year as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Councillor Bethel, do you want to come back in? Are you okay? That's fine. Can I bring Councillor Catherine, please?
Thank you, Chair. In answer to Councillor Firth's question, you did indicate that in children's services the situation was worsening. Can I suggest to you that your department must have a worst case scenario? And if that's the case, shouldn't it be shared with scrutiny now, rather than giving us any nasty surprises later on. Secondly, I shall ask three questions, Chair. Ask them all at once. Yeah. The second one, there's mention about transport costs in children's services. Couldn't we realistically be asking the combined authority to take those transport costs off our hands? That would help the situation, particularly, I think, in children's services. They are, after all, the transport authority. And thirdly, on the housing revenue account, I was slightly disturbed when you indicated that the housing department was looking at repairs to bring the budget back into balance. I think most members will be getting an increased workload from council tenants with outstanding repairs. Is there, in fact, no other way of bringing it back into balance? I appreciate it's ring-fenced, because otherwise I'd like to know whether or not we've have imposed an emergency repairs only, which I think would concern us all very much indeed, and certainly concern tenants.
Yeah, Victoria, do you want to come back?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just on the first point, we are pulling the report together at the moment on the children's services position, and we have been forecasting throughout the year on the position and reporting that through to Executive Board and Scrutiny. We are monitoring it very closely, and we do, as I've said, forecast to the end of the year. I can't give exact figures now, so I wouldn't want to do that in this board, but I will bring it to Executive Board in February, and it will come here afterwards. On the transport costs, these are the transport costs to do with transporting the children mainly to schools. This is a local authority responsibility, and the combined authority do with the bus transfer, but not some of those other transport costs that the local authority has to provide, and therefore, apart from the transport of the schools buses, the rest would need to be picked up by the local authority. In regard to the HRA, I know the measures are being considered at the moment around reducing the capital programme. I haven't got the detail on what that would be, but I could bring that back to Scrutiny Board so that it's clear on what action is being taken to bring the HRA into a balanced position by the end of the year. Thank you.
Councillor Carter, do you want to come back in, or are you happy with the response?
I'm not happy with any of the answers, to be honest. But the last one on the HRA, I do think the sooner we find out what the housing department is proposing to bring it back into balance, the more comfortable members and probably tenants will feel.
Thank you. Does anybody want to come back, or shall I move to next board member? Yep. Okay, Councillor Palmer.
Victoria, many thanks for your presentation, and I just want to pay thanks to everybody who's contributed to making this report. It's clear to all of us that the major pull on finances is children looked after services, as well as inflation and cost of living generally. Looking at that deficit of £35 million, which is looked after children looked after services rather. I know there's been some interesting initiatives within the council to provide and expand our children's homes, small children's homes, and long term that looks like a good way to make inroads into this massive cost to this council and every other council due to privatised children's homes. Can you tell me how do we have as a council a name to provide a certain amount of homes, and how much would that cost? Do we have any idea?
Thank you, Chair. There's a number of different initiatives that are going on around the children's and families so that we ensure that we've got a mixed economy for those children. So we're looking at the cohort of children that are currently looked after and identifying those children that can safely return home, those children that would be good for foster caring, those children that are in external residential, which would benefit from being internal to the region. And those are the things that we're looking at the moment and how we execute that as quickly as we can, but obviously very safely for those children. What we are doing around the children's homes is looking at our small group living. That's what those residential homes are called, and they're 3 or 4 bedroomed homes. And we've currently got a plan for 8 small group living homes. What we are doing at the moment is working with the service on those children who are currently in external residential, who would benefit to come back into the city and to say, is that adequate or do we need to do more? And that's what we're reviewing at the moment. So there will be a future report to Executive Board on that sufficiency and what the proposal is going forward. We have got a business case. I haven't got it to hand though, on what the savings are. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Councillor Palmer, are you happy? Okay, yeah. Can I bring in Councillor Firth back in, please?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify one thing. I do believe that some of the homes that some of the looked after children outside of the city are being currently housed in is actually not just from the private sector, but it's just simply that the cost and provision of that. But I appreciate that colleagues may be able to clarify that. I think just wanted to ask a quick question, which is largely related to the next item as well, which is that there is a concern that if we're consistently seeing a regular increase, understandably, in children's services costs, are we going to be having substantial time if we need to then have further cutbacks or other decisions to be made, that actually there's going to be enough time to consult and actually ask people's opinion before those decisions are taken if we suddenly need to find the money to cover an increasing overspend?
Can I just clarify on the question? We've gone out for consultation on the budget as we are. We have seen that the numbers and pressures within children's and families is increasing, but we have got action on what we need to do to bring that back into budget for going forward. That will take time, but the actions that we're taking at the moment and the work that we're undertaking within children's services should help to manage that. If we get to the point where we're starting the financial year and that position has worsened, then we will need to take some action to bring the budget back into balance within 24-25. And we would consult on any proposals that were put forward throughout the year once we know what they are. Sorry, Marianne.
I wonder if I could just add, Chair, if you don't mind, on children and families, just to, as I say, to supplement what Victoria's already talked about. I mean, it is important, and I know this gets talked about at Executive Board and members are acutely aware, I think it is a national problem that, I think every council, or pretty much every council, is experiencing in terms of the numbers of looked after children, particularly post-COVID. As you know, Victoria Eaton did her annual report on from the DPH perspective on mental health and the impact, your surgeries, you'll be seeing the impact that families are going through, and that is resulting in increased numbers of looked after children in most areas. Our comparative rate for the numbers of looked after children isn't increasing though as much as other people's is. So there's a measure that's called a rate per 10,000 children. The increase in our rate is about 4, and the increase in our statistical neighbours, I think, is about 16. So actually, even though our costs are increasing, and they are massively, the rate of our looked after children isn't increasing as much as others. What is happening is, again, has been well reported through the media, it is the costs of some of those external placements that is increasing disproportionately. And we do have analysis that we'd be happy to share with scrutiny members that plots the rate of increase of numbers of looked after children against the cost of those children. And the trajectories on the graphs are quite different. That's what's causing us the biggest problem. Just one other thing that to add to Victoria's explanation, you know, the service are also looking at a new service for adolescents where, you know, we are finding that more children are needing to be taken into care. And I think Julie's view is that probably they don't all need to come into care. But at the moment, we haven't necessarily got the capacity and the services to be able to keep those children out of care safely. So that's another thing. So there's a lot of activity going on, but I think it is important to see that in terms of the national context as well. And the other thing just to mention on Councillor Carter's question, I'm not aware of any move to emergency repairs only for housing in the HRA, just for completeness. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Firth, do you want to come back briefly, please?
Just to comment, Chair. No, I fully appreciate where what was just explained by the director. The situation is the fact that the individual placements themselves are costing more rather than an exponential growth in the number of children needing to be looked after. I think that I was just going to say that also the main reason that I was asking the question is simply to ensure that given that we have such tight times now until the end of the financial year, that given that we can't get a worst case scenario clarified in public until February, that we need to know as soon as possible so that ultimately we don't have any further cutbacks that need to be brought forward in this financial year within the time frame. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Can I come bring in Councillor Bethel, please?
Thanks, Chair. I've got a few, if that's okay. The passenger transport. Does the passenger transport for students come out of the DSG, or is it a separate budget? And would it previously have been part of the budget when it was maintained schools that there would have been kind of cut off the top of what schools would have been given as their regular grant? Is that, I guess I'm trying to get to the bottom of, is the issues with the transport an issue with the academisation of schools? Is there a link between those two or not? Is it just because of the EHCPs getting far more of them? In one of the paragraphs, 1.5, it says NNDR pressure, and I don't know what that means. And then are you okay to just talk to us a little bit about the reserves in terms of, it sounds like there are general reserves and then there's directorate reserves. And I wonder if the reserves have, some directorates have more reserves than others because of historically being higher funded and having less pressure on them. And are they sort of equalised to the amount of funds in a budget for each year? And then in terms of the adult social care and absorbed funding via the staffing, is that likely to affect the service? And if that's the case, are we likely to see that there are the more expensive care packages are going elsewhere because we are having less staff and therefore less capacity, which kind of becomes like a, I guess, a self-fulfilling spiral of if we're getting we're less able to provide the more expensive care packages, then we're having to pay more out. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On the passenger transport, I wouldn't say it's around the academisation. It's because of the number of EHCPs that we're getting coming through, which is causing us a pressure around that provision of the transport position.
Board members, anybody watching on YouTube channel, this is just a test alarm. It happens every Monday morning, so just be patient for a few minutes. Thank you. Victoria, do you want to carry on, please?
Mama, there we go. Transport is a local authority responsibility, and therefore it can't be charged to dedicated schools grant, unfortunately. NNDR is the national non-domestic rates, so it's your business rates, and that's the pressure around that. On reserves, we have different classification of reserves. So we have general balances, which is the amount that we set aside for the council. And this is around risks within the budget. And we identify that in the report that goes to Budget Council. And the amount that we set aside, if those risks materialise, the level of general balances that we have. Then we have reserves, which are general reserves, which are things like the Strategic Contingency Reserve, the Miriam House Reserve. And those are things, the Innovation Reserve, the Investor Save Reserve. Those are things that we've set up corporately for those initiatives that we want to do. Firstly, to make sure that the council is financially resilient and sustainable for the future, which was why the Strategic Contingency Reserve and the Miriam House Reserve was created for, and the current situation that we're finding ourselves is why we would use those. The Investor Save and the Innovation Reserve was to make sure that we could invest, even though we were going through these times of financial difficulties, in services to transform them so that we could still realise those efficiencies from that investment. And that's what we've continued to do. Otherwise, we won't improve and make the efficiencies that we need to do. Then we have directorate reserves, and these are reserves that are set up for a specific purpose. So they're not based on the size of the size of the directorate. They're where the directorates have identified that they need a reserve to be able to invest something in the future. So we set that reserve up, or they've received funding from a specific purpose that can be carried forward into future years, and it's got to be spent on that purpose. We report those to Executive Board and the use of those reserves so that we're quite clear. If a directorate has a reserve that was set up for a specific purpose, either through grant funding or ring-fenced contributions or for a reason, and they don't use it for that position, then they have to go to Executive Board and ask for that to be changed, and that's something that we do at the year end. So those on the reserves. On the adult social care staffing, I haven't got that detail to hand around to be able to say that because we've got reduced staffing, has that had an impact on the service delivery, but I'm sure we can get a response drafted for that for you, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Councillor Bithell? Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Cooper? Would you like to make any comment on this item, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And just a couple of comments, really, and thank you to Scrutiny Board members for their questions and comments on the financial monitoring report. I think it's important that I do say that we take to every Executive Board a report on the financial monitoring in the organisation. Now, there is no requirement for us to do that, but we do because we think it's important that we are open and transparent for not only elected members, but for our residents and the public to know and understand the situation in terms of the finances with the council. And we are committed to continuing to do that. But as members have pointed out, there is an overspend forecast for the end of the year, and each month that figure would be adjusted according to the most recent data and facts that we have. And at the current figures that we're looking at, that it's £35 million, 35.3 million in the report. And it's also important that we say that it's not just Leeds that are seeing pressures around their children's services budgets and overspends. And I'm sure members of Scrutiny and indeed anybody on YouTube will have heard about recent difficulties. Thank you, Rob. I was being blinded by the line. I appreciate that. will have seen the recent difficulties that quite a number of local authorities are finding themselves in terms of the pressure, the in-year pressures that are being felt within their children's services. I think I also want to inform Scrutiny Board that we as an organisation have been lobbying the government. We've been doing that through a number of ways, through the LGA, but through ourselves as a cabinet and executive board. We've been asking the government to treat the national issue of children's services spending to be treated similar to they did with adult social care. If you remember a few years ago, the government recognised that there were an issue with adult social care costing local government a lot of money, and so they looked at that really well, and they gave extra funding to adult social care through to local authorities. And so we've asked the government to treat children's services the same. Our own chief executive, Tom Reardon, has also been lobbying through his routes as well for them to do the same. And unfortunately, that's not been accepted by the government at the moment. We do hope that they may well change their minds over the coming year and indeed make an exception, because otherwise we're going to see more local authorities, unfortunately, being in worse financial circumstances due to the costs of children's services. And to be really clear, it is the cost that private providers for external placements are charging local authorities that is creating a lot of our overspending children's at the moment. I just want to really clarify a couple of points also that were asked. Number one, that there is no move towards only emergency repairs, Councillor Carter, so I hope we can reassure you around that one. And in terms of the transport costs, it is the local authority's duty to provide transport for children in certain circumstances. So I just wanted to make those two clear as well. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Mariana, and thank you, Councillor Cooper. So the recommendation on page 17 on our agenda pack, are we happy to approve? Okay, thank you. So we can now move to item number 8, page 67, which is the proposal budget for 24-25 and provisional budget for 25-26 and 27. Before I ask Victoria to introduce this report, can I ask Rob to briefly to just introduce this as well?
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, just the scrutiny context to this item then. So there were a series of working groups held in December. Every scrutiny board held one on the budget. And then as part of the budget and policy framework of the council, scrutiny is a required consultee on budget proposals. So just for members' awareness, the consideration today will form part of a composite report that Scrutiny do that will be going to Executive Board on the 7th of February. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. Can I ask Victoria to introduce the report, and then I will ask Mariana and Eve to run through some of the key issues from the services area as well, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is the proposed budget, as has been said, for 24-25 and provisional budgets for 25-26 and 26-27. This report brings together both the provisional budget and the savings reports that were considered by Executive Board on the 13th of December and have gone out for consultation, which is now closed. The outcome of consultation and the scrutiny by the scrutiny panels will be taken into consideration when the report's considered by executive board for them to take their decisions on proposing a budget to full council in February. What this report does provide is the assumptions around the budget that have been taken, the announcements around the funding that's been made available to the council, and the outcome of the autumn statement, the finance policy statement that was announced on the 5th of December, and also then the latter, the provisional settlement. From the provisional settlement, as has been communicated by the informal sessions, that there was no additional funding. When we worked through the figures, we were actually 800,000 worse off than what we'd provisionally put, and that will be included in the report to Executive Board in February. The report shows that the council, to enable a balanced budget to be proposed, has identified 65.8 million of savings. 7.4 of those were identified as part of the 2024-25 budget process, and a further 58.4 million were considered by Executive Board in October and December and were brought here for scrutiny. The report also details the other elements within the budget around the business rates, around the dedicated schools grant, the housing revenue account, and the increases around the rent increases and the standing charge around the service charges, and also provides details of the 10-year capital programme for information. What I would say is that we've still got a position, a budget gap position over the next 2 years following 24-25, and we need to make 106.7 million of savings in those future years, and they will be considered as part of the budget process for next year. I think those are the main things that I wanted to draw out, because we have had quite detailed working group sessions on the budget as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Can I bring Eve in, please?
Thank you, Chair. So in relation to the Scrutiny Board's responsibilities, in Appendix 2 of the papers at page 13, you'll see a summary of all of the proposals that relate to the culture services. The two particularly to highlight are the proposed closure of Thwaite Mills and surrender of the lease. And secondly, the proposed closure of Pudsey Civic Hall and its potential to be therefore declared surplus to asset management and potentially disposed of. Those two that I've just mentioned are subject to public consultation at the moment. The public consultation closes for both this week, so there is still time for members of the public to include their comments in that consultation for consideration.
Thank you, Eve. Mariana, do you want to come in as well?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to add from Strategy and Resources Directorate perspective, obviously we've been through all the processes that members are aware that we've been through in terms of, you know, understanding our budgets, prioritisation, etc. And we've got what the detail of the proposals that are in the appendix, the one that Eve just pointed to for Strategy and Resources. I would pull out perhaps in three chunks, really. One is for the kind of support services within the directorate. So HR, finance, procurement, IDS, strategy and performance. You know, roughly it's around about a 10% savings. That will mean that we have fewer staff. As you know, we are trying to do that through the targeted voluntary leavers scheme. But it will mean some reductions in services. We are doing our absolute best to minimise the impact of that. And all colleagues are currently working on how we manage to try and, make sure we still provide really good support to the whole organisation across all of those strands, but doing it in different ways, sometimes providing more or less support according to the amount of resource. So that's the support service impact. It shouldn't go unnoticed. I know Councillor Cooper will often say, you know, in some ways it's easy to think, people think it's easy to cut the back office, but actually it does have consequences in terms of governance. So important to note those savings. The second bucket, if you like, is shared services, which is, you know, a support service, but also frontline. You know, the Scrutiny Board at the last meeting heard all about the contact centre. This also includes all the business administration that we have right the way across the council and a number of transactional services, including payroll. So again, all important services. We have got significant proposals to reduce staffing in those areas, which again, we're working through at the moment to, you know, manage the impact of that. You know, we're trying to not take much, if anything, out of the contact centre so that we don't impact on calls to the public. But again, it will mean that we have fewer administration support, for example, across the organisation. And obviously we'll be making sure we protect things like payroll so that we, you know, kind of maintain service delivery on those really important aspects. The third chunk is Civic Enterprise Leeds, where, you know, we already brought proposals forward in October around some increase in fees, and we're looking really hard at all those service areas where we trade, just to make sure that if we're trading, we're doing so on a firm footing. And again, we're still in the midst of that work at the moment to make sure that we can deliver the level of savings required, again, with as minimal impact on the public as we want. It's a little while since this board considered Civic Enterprise Leeds. It was probably about this time last year, actually, so there will be some new board members, but people do know that those services, it is, you know, it's school meals, it's the passenger transport that we've talked about, and they are providing services to the public and therefore are also really important. So as always, we're doing our level best to, you know, make the savings but still try and be able to deliver as many services as we possibly can. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mariana. Before I bring members for questions on this item, can I ask Councillor Pryor or Councillor Cooper want to make a comment now, or would they wait till the end of the discussion? Councillor Cooper.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I suppose just a couple of introductory comments really for the budget. I know that I've attended working group meetings with scrutiny members as well, going through quite in detail some of this work that's in the paper today as well, and in the proposed budget. Just to reiterate really that we find ourselves in a really, really difficult situation financially, and we have a budget gap of almost £60 million to breach somehow. So that means we are having to take some tough decisions, and some decisions that we would otherwise not be taking if we didn't have such a gap that we had to have to make up. We have to provide a balanced budget, legally required to do so, and so for us to be able to do that, as I've said, we are putting forward some proposals here for the budget that are maybe not as palatable as scrutiny board members would ordinarily expect from us. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Any comments or question for the board? Councillor Firth.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Three issues. Clearly, this whole budget will be the matter for a long debate in council very shortly. No doubt alternative views will be expressed. But there's no doubt it's a difficult budget, and Councillor Cooper's quite right. There are various fairly unpalatable things in there, and some of us have our own views on how these could have been addressed probably earlier, but that's not for, I think, scrutiny today. However, three issues I do want to raise. Number one is I am informed that the car parking charges at Golden Acre Park
which have already been out to consultation, and I believe the consultation has concluded 80% of the respondents being against car parking charges, has now been delegated to officers to take the decision now. If I'm right, what is the point of scrutiny even debating things? What is the point of the council debating things? And I would like a very straight and honest answer to that, please. The second 2 points are both related to each other. Pudsey Civic Hall and Thwaite Mill. I'm concerned, and I keep saying this, I shall have to stop, but members who've not been around for as long as me will not recall, but there's been occasion in the past when both Pudsey Civic Hall and Thwaite Mill and other things have been on the officers' chopping lists, and it just seems to me that we're missing a trick in both cases. Pudsey Civic Hall first. A well-loved resource in the Pudsey area, but for a much wider group. And I think consultation, which, as Councillor Price said, concludes at the end of this week, will be bringing forth all sorts of comments. It is a big asset. Grossly, it has been undersold. There's no proper marketing plan, hasn't been for some considerable time. You'll be getting examples in the consultation of the way customers are sometimes dealt with, how bookings are dealt with, as though almost the council has no will to make it work, making it become a self-fulfilling prophecy, which I find wholly unacceptable. I think we are well able to put together a proper marketing plan and bring the building certainly into balance and possibly better. And more ideas on that will come out later. I understand Councillor Pryor has agreed at the request of Councillor Amanda Carter to come to our community committee with officers and talk about the proposed closure. Thwaite Mill, another one that, and Councillor Minkin has drawn our attention to it. Again, the question I raise is, has there been proper marketing of a heritage asset? Has there been a will to make it succeed, or is it just an easy box for officers to tick? And I think in both instances that we should be referring back to the exec board and the administration to look at alternatives to closure and bring forward a proper marketing plan for both buildings with the necessary publicity. And I'm sure that certainly in the case of Pudsey Civic Hall, a very strong case can be made for it remaining open. It isn't just there to be used as a cash cow by sale by the local authority. And Thwaite Mill is a heritage asset, which again I would be very sorry to see lost. So I would like to see both these items taken back to the executive and to the leadership, and with a specific ask that proper marketing plans are brought forward as to how this situation can be current situation financially can be rectified without the necessity of closure. But I would like an answer also on the consultation on Golden Acre Park.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Who's going to pick up the car park charges and then Pudsey and the mill? Is it going to be Mariana?
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that one up, Chair. I'm not aware of the latest position. Well, I know the consultation's closed. I was just checking with James about the decision. But I think there's more work to be done in terms of TRO consultation. So it's unlikely to be completed before Budget Council.
Eve?
Thank you, Councillor Carter. So beginning with Pudsey Civic Hall. So we know that in terms of the activities that happen in the hall, those activities through the year cover the costs of the staff and the management of the hall, but the overall income for the site is reliant on the income from the car parking charges that are attached to the hall. The car parking income has fallen away post-COVID because we used to have an arrangement with a large business nearby and a long-term lease of the car park that was supporting the site overall. With that and the new car parking that's been made available for free at the station, there is an income pressure against Pudsey Civic Hall, so it's in the round. But in terms of the actual activities in the hall, those activities are covering the cost of running the hall. Certainly, both this proposal and Thwaite Mill, neither of these proposals are proposals that are easy for officers to bring forwards. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have to be discussing these proposals, and certainly it's challenging for my leadership team to be having these discussions with their staff and taking staff through the consultation processes as well. In terms of Pudsey Civic, we'll be kind of looking to obviously see the outcomes from the consultation and taking that into account going forwards. The second point you made around marketing, we did undertake a piece of work through Leeds Museums and Galleries in autumn of 2022, which highlighted that there was areas where we could improve on promoting our venues and attractions, and there is a service review going on around that at the moment, around looking at how we promote our attractions, etc., across the council. So there's action in hand already around that. In terms of then moving on to Thwaite, some specifics around Thwaite Watermill. The site is promoted alongside the other 8 sites that form part of Leeds Museums and Galleries, and has some dedicated resources that do that promotion. The hours of visiting at the site were actually reduced in relation to levels of demand, and pre-pandemic the numbers, yes, they were double what they are now, but if we took out people that came to events to the site, the numbers would be even lower. There's a kind of debate, yes, to be had potentially about the visitor numbers, but the ability in the current financial circumstances, surrendering the lease of Thwaite, which is an asset that we don't own, will allow the service to consolidate its focus on the other 8 sites that are part of Leeds Museums and Galleries, and to be able to continue to deliver a really kind of leading museums and galleries service.
Thank you, Eva. Councillor Carter, do you want to come back in?
Yes, I take it then that the assurance from one of the officers about the car parking at Golden Acre is that no decision will be taken prior to the budget meeting. That's the confirmation I'm after. As regards the Pudsey Civic Hall, I mean, we've known about the car parking issues for 2 years plus. And I would suggest that precious little has been done to offset that income pressure, despite the increased car parking at the station. Initially, as well, I must say that people who use the hall are already being offered alternative accommodation, which is wholly unacceptable. I'll give you an example. One of the groups that uses Pudsey Civic and generates, I'm told, 40, 50 cars because they come from all around Leeds. Let's be sure about this. The Pudsey Civic Hall is used by people all over the place and has ample car parking, should go to Carvley Mechanics Institute. The horror of my residence in Carvley, about 40 or 50 cars landing in terrace house side streets and heaven knows what, is amazing, and I'm up to my neck in complaints. I mean, it is just a stupid suggestion that anything that generates significant traffic can be relocated to Carvley Mechanics Institute. Anyone who knows it knows it's would be highly dangerous to do so. So I'm not at all sure you've studied this correctly, and I'll stick to the suggestion I made before. And hopefully we may even see Councillor Pryor bring some alternatives to the Community Committee when he comes before us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Mariana?
Yeah, just to clarify, Councillor Clark, what said on the car parking was that a decision was unlikely to be made before Budget Council.
Thank you, Marianne. Just to follow on from Councillor Carter's regarding Dwight Mill, have we had any feedback from the Canal and River Trust? What might they have future plans? And it's important, like you say, it's historical, it's heritage for our city.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, the Canals and Rivers Trust have been very public about the fact that they do not have the funds either to kind of operate the building when if the proposal goes forwards in terms of us surrendering the lease. However, we're committed to working with them if other alternatives emerge in terms of approaches to ourselves or the Canals and Rivers Trust to operate the site. Obviously, we can't speak in the kind of public domain about potential approaches that we might be discussing at the moment, but I'm hopeful that something may come forward for the site, and we would obviously support any approaches of that nature to try and ensure the site can continue to be looked after and open to the public.
Thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Firth in, please?
Thank you, Chair. Further to what Councillor Carter has been saying, I was about to say about the Canal and River Trust, because I understand that obviously they won't be able to open it themselves. But given that we don't own the building ourselves, therefore there is already a significant cost that we have saving there, and therefore the deal that we have is particularly good in terms of providing our heritage and keeping it open to the public. And I have to be honest, I believe that we haven't, if I put it on the record, marketed it as well enough as we should have done, and given its uniqueness compared to some of our other attractions across the city. I wanted to raise the issue of consultation fatigue. This is understandably, under the pressures that we're seeing, the second time if you take in the fact that the consultation began in 2023, the second time in a year that we've consulted on parking charges at parks. Can the officers or anyone give us any particular update on whether the response rate is as high as they would like it, or how it compares to the previous one last year?
If I may, just on our responsibilities around Thwaite Watermill. The site is a really challenging site from a maintenance point of view. It floods regularly, and when it floods, we have issues with the working water wheels there and invasive species, and it costs a significant amount of money to maintain those water wheels. We've also had to invest in the site. The last time we invested was £500,000 in 2020 to support the ongoing costs of maintaining the site. So whilst on the surface, Councillor is right around the overhead costs of the staff running the site, the costs that we put in through our maintenance budget over time are significant.
Marianne, do you want to?
Yeah, I don't have the information to hand in terms of the responses on consultation responses on the car parking, I'm afraid. They'll obviously get reported in due course. What I can say is that the general consultation that we've done on the budget, which opens immediately after Executive Board, as the papers went public in December and has been open for about a month and closed on Wednesday last week, we had about 1,700 or just more than 1,700 responses, which actually is very much in line with last year and the year before. So there may be an element of consultation fatigue, but we're not actually seeing that on the broader consultation.
Thank you. Councillor Firth, do you want to come back?
Thank you to officers for those responses. I think that the main point is the fact that the car park consultations are understandably complex and therefore separate, and therefore it'd be fascinating to see whether we get a similar response to those that actually happened earlier in the year, or otherwise generally the response is ultimately shown. I think that really when it comes to here, it's about being able to say that we're in a situation where understandably, there are big decisions that are having to be taken. People are then at the same time being asked to be consulted on them during a time when, unfortunately, it is not the most appropriate time for them to be responding. But I appreciate at the same time that's been established by Mariana and others in the past, that that's the only time within the financial year that we are able to adequately do that and prepare consultations and being able to actually respond to them in due course. I just want to ask a particular issue about which is on the culture portfolio, which is in relation to events and lights and the reduction in cultural spend, among others. Could you just elaborate for me a bit more what that involves in terms of the reduction? And in terms of events and lights, I know that there are a number of particularly villages or areas that are increasingly having their own self-funded Christmas events. And I just wondered whether we're adequately marketing ourselves to them as a provider to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's going to pick this up?
Just answering the point about a bit more detail around the line item events and lights and income generation. Just to be clear, this is around looking at the kind of the activity primarily that we deliver through Millennium Square, rather than the lights service. So we know that we can potentially make a greater income on the summer series, for example, and we're confident around that. So that's primarily where that additional income is coming from. The councillor is right that we do provide a service right across the city to support Christmas events very successfully, and have strong arrangements with all of the different districts and with councillors probably around this table.
Thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Chapman, please?
Thank you. It was just back to Thwaite Mills. Sorry. Have we found out yet if there's going to be any charges relating to breaking the lease early, or what they'll be?
Eve or Marianne, do you want to pick up this?
So no, not as yet, no, but there is quite right to raise it, councillor, because there is, of course, a risk around the dilapidations charge around the potential early kind of termination of the lease. Although because we invested in the site in 2020 to the tune of £500,000, as I previously referred, we're in a good position on that account in terms of our discussions with the Canals and Rivers Trust. It's my colleagues in asset management who will lead on that discussion and exiting of the lease. So Mark Mills, who's part of Angela Barnacle's team.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I'd say is we might be in a good position because we invested all that money 2 or 3 years ago. But if Canals and Rivers Trust are in the same position we're in, I'm guessing they're looking to enforce what's ever in the contract with them. So that could be a risk to the overall.
Can I bring in Councillor Kidger, please?
Hi, being involved in the museum, I feel very strongly about Thwaite Mills, and I understand there's a big campaign going ahead to try and save it. Can you just tell me exactly what we are saving? I just can't find it in these papers. Exactly what we are saving coming out of it, and do we? Yes, obviously, you know, do we incur a charge, as what Councillor Chapman said?
Is it Councillor Pryor going to come?
It's 1 million over 5 years, and on Councillor Chapman's point, that's still in discussion.
Thank you for that.
And do you want to come back? Are you happy?
Well, yeah, we've got, you know, whatever, what will be, but just to say that there is a large campaign that they're trying to save it, you know, fingers crossed, but we just have to see. But thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask Councillor Thompson, please?
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 things, but I'll try and keep them brief. And sorry, my voice isn't going too well, which some people may be happy about today. So very briefly on Pudsey Civic Hall, I have been in touch with Eve already. Just some feedback that its importance as an accessible venue and how that then reflects on how we treat other venues around the city. Just knowing that there are groups who use it with large numbers of wheelchair users and it works for them. So depending on what decisions made, the importance of support around that. On parking, this affects our ward in two areas, both with Netherfield Road, which has been a contentious car park for many years for many reasons, and is effectively a commuter car park, not a district centre one, which we're addressing with officers, but also the Chevin parking. That I feel we really need to be really clear with people when we consult about what that means and what we do with those, with the feedback we get. From what I understand, there has been a high rate of response on Chevin car parks in particular. I believe there will be on Netherfield Road as well. But, and I have read some reports on it, which I need to read in more detail, but just that we really need to be clear about what that consultation means, that if a majority says no and we were to go ahead, how that all works, how that we're honest and open with people. And I'm not saying that we're not being, but just that is really important because there are major concerns about the possible impact of displaced parking. And if we're encouraging people to use the train and they have to drive there because there's no bus and we're charging them to park, that has consequences potentially for lots of things. But I see that in the wider context of the impossible decisions that we're having to make. I want to acknowledge the incredible work that officers are doing on this and how exhausting it must be to have to do it. And then on Thwaite Mills, it's a beautiful place, but it's incredibly challenging. We know Canals and Rivers Trust have had their funding slashed, just as local authorities have. Would be keen to see a community solution and support that, but again, appreciating that it's a really difficult situation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is it Marianne and Eve both were going to? Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. So, yes, in relation to the point about accessibility, we will be going back over our quality impact assessment to make sure that we've taken all of that into account. And we are already talking with groups specifically about how we can continue to support their activity should Pudsey Civic Hall be closed. And then also in relation to Thwaite, absolutely, we would really like to see an outcome where the site has a future use and can remain open to the public. So any kind of options that come forwards, we'll try and support in terms of seeing if there is a way that can happen.
Yeah, just to pick up your question on consultation, if I may, Chair. I mean, we do, consult as much as we possibly can, and we are kind of devilled if we do and devilled if we don't, to be honest, because, we can get criticised for consultation fatigue as well as, not consulting enough. What officers do, is do that consultation and, well advised. We've had reports here about how we approach consultation in the past, and then try and take account of that in decision making, document that. Often, the consultation report itself will be an appendix to the decision making. But I guess it is also important to say, though, they're not votes. We're not asking for votes for or against. It is a consultation response, and hopefully that will raise issues. And then, as Eve said, actually there, in terms of using the quality impact assessment as well, that helps you then inform your planning of whatever the decision is made, whichever way, or whether a partial decision is made. So that's the process answer. I'm afraid I haven't seen the reports of the consultation on car parking, so I can't give any more than that, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, do you want to come back in?
Very briefly on the consultation one, I think there's the perception that you're asking us, but you've decided anyway. And that's for us as ward members as well as officers as to how we respond to and deal with that. But that is a big challenge at the moment, I'm sure you'll understand.
We'll do our best on comms with that, but it is a tricky one to get right.
Thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Firth back in, please?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask two further questions. The first question is because we've also got HR with us, and there is significant mention of reductions in staff, including voluntary measures and otherwise. And I just wondered if we could get some more detail or meat on the bone in relation to how that process is going to be undertaken to ensure that we don't lose the essential talent that we need that will help us keep us going through what is very difficult and choppy waters, understandably. And the second point is, it's been raised about the parking charges, particularly when it comes to attractions. There isn't a detailed list or provided in the consultations where those attractions may be. For example, the proposal to bring in parking charges at both Roundhay and Temple Newsham golf clubs, when particularly on the latter's point, when it was previously accused of not making enough money, it is now making profit for the council. And as a result, has that been included in the assessment that unfortunately we won't bide ourselves coming back and actually ruin the work that we've done to improve and make profit on something that is eagerly helping us to keep our budget stable?
Thank you, Councillor Firth. So just regards the impact on workforce. So in terms of the content of all the service reviews that you've got in your scrutiny bundle, probably about 24 make direct reference to impact on our workforce. And if you aggregate all of those figures up, it equates to around 361 staff. So around sort of 2.5 to 3% of our workforce. As the Director of Strategy and Resources already said, some time ago in preparation for that, we did introduce a whole range of different voluntary measures to enable us to deliver the financial challenges as set out. As we always have done, we do always do whatever we can to try to avoid, reduce and mitigate the risk of compulsory redundancies, and we've got a very good track record of that. So our targeted voluntary leaver scheme that we've had in place for a few months now is still going through that process, Councillor Firth, so we've not finished or concluded that. But the number of staff that we have interested in that scheme, and in addition to the flexible retirement scheme, should enable us to deliver that figure that I've quoted in terms of those who could be affected by the financial challenge. We have obviously tried to do that through a targeted route to make sure that we are engaging and consulting with the right populations of staff. And throughout this difficult process, as you can expect, we're obviously consulting directly with staff and our trade union colleagues to do it in a fair and transparent way. So we've got a few more months yet, but at the moment we're very hopeful, very mindful that those schemes are put into place should deliver those cost savings.
Thank you, Andy. Can I bring in Councillor Hinchcliffe, please?
Thanks, Chair. And just on Thwaite Mills, sorry to come back on this again. But in Bramley, we have Bramley Baths, which is fantastic, gold standard social enterprise. So I would encourage you to speak with them if you get any kind of offers around social enterprise for that. On the new homes bonus, it's briefly mentioned in the report, and I just wondered what clarification we've had from government, if any, in the provisional settlement, because I'm not aware of that, and how is Right to Buy expected to impact our housing growth programme after 24-25? Thanks, Chair.
So just coming back on the comment about Thwaite Mill. So I don't disagree that we've got some great arrangements across the city. It would really be a matter for the Canals and Rivers Trust around who might operate the site in the future, but we would work really closely with them.
On the new homes bonus, we have had confirmation that that will be continuing. What that does cause us concern around, though, is that the new homes bonus is how it's distributed is to those authorities where there is more affluent areas. They generate more new homes bonus, and it was a top slice of the revenue support grant. What we would prefer is to be put back into the revenue support grant and distributed on the needs basis, and we would benefit from that happening. There is a consultation out at the moment that we're responding to, the deadlines today, and we will be pushing that point across. Just on the housing revenue account and the Right to Buy scheme, I was just checking, but there's 550 sales forecast for 24-25. What that means is that we have reduced income from the sales of those properties, which does have an impact for the HRA. Thank you.
Mariana, do you want to come back?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just for completeness, there was one of Councillor Firth's questions we didn't answer, I think about Roundhay and Temple Newsom. I mean, I don't have the detail on the car parking, as I don't think members would expect me to, but what I'll do is make sure that James is aware of the feedback from various board members today in relation to the car parking issues that have been raised, so that he can inform his papers with those.
Thank you. Do you want to come back? No, that's fine. Councillor Chapman, please.
Just a quick one on the car parking charges. Are the quality impact assessments being reviewed for all the district car parking centres? My understanding is there wasn't very much done before they were chosen, certainly not in the case of Rothwell, where we've got similar issues with displacement parking and also businesses that use the car park on a regular basis and have done for years.
As I just mentioned, I don't know in terms of giving a categoric answer, but I'll raise the issue with James. I'm confident that equality impact assessments will be done at the right time and in the right way. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Burke to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure I already know the answer to this, but I think it's prudent to ask the question anyway. It's around the equality impact assessments for the reduction in staffing. So fully understand there's a budget need to reduce that staffing cost, but there's another two aspects in there, and one of them that I think is equally important is the human impact. So the impact on the staff who are left behind. And I know talking to some of the groups, they're really getting stressed out about the perceived or real increase in workloads, which will obviously have an ongoing impact, lead to, hopefully not, but increased absenteeism, mental health problems. And the other is actually impact to service, doesn't it, which results in increased complaints and dissatisfaction with council, so on and so forth. I just wondered if that assessment had been done. And finally on that, it's to make sure that there isn't a disproportionate impact to marginalised groups, which is hugely important as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Burke. It is really important, and you've probably seen from the communications with Tom and cabinet members as well have been really keen to make that sure that we do really pay absolute attention to that. And I think the initial equality impact assessments were actually included in the exec board papers. We've certainly all done those at the early stages, although I would say that we do still have to keep revisiting those, because each time we get into a bit more detailed implementation, then it sheds a little bit more light on what that workforce impact might be, or the customer impact might be. So I think, again, all I can give you is a reassurance that we're doing our best, but it is challenging, because as Councillor Cooper mentioned earlier, that 58 million, it's and the staffing numbers, and as I outlined from a directorate perspective, there are going to be fewer staff delivering, and we're trying to maintain services, but we can't completely without, and we've had the conversation on the other side of this, haven't we, at this board, when we've been talking about the staff survey and the workload pressures that colleagues are under, and how we're trying to mitigate the worst effects of those. As you know, we're doing our best around different use of technology. We're trying to do reduce bureaucracy wherever we can, and do things like that don't impact on the customer, and try and make sure that we have a really good wellbeing offer and that staff are well supported. But it's probably one of the biggest leadership challenges that I've talked here before about the 2,200 managers that we've got. One of the biggest challenges we face as managers is balancing that and trying to do our best within what we've got available to us. And unfortunately, that's why we're having to bring forward some of these proposals.
Thank you, Mariana. Councillor Burke, do you want to come back? Thank you. Just briefly, Councillor Chapman.
Thanks, Chair. Just quickly on Thwaite Mills. In the papers, it says it's got the second lowest income level as a proportion of expenditure. What's the worst performing attraction?
Councillor Chapman will have to check, because I think I know, but I don't want to give you the wrong answer. So I'll send you a note.
Thank you. Thank you to Victoria. Mariana, Eve and Andy. And also thank you, Councillor Cooper. Do you want to make any comment? And Councillor Pryor, want to make a comment as well before I want to wrap it up?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's just important to make some concluding comments. There have been a few themes in questions from members. I think it goes without saying that some of the proposals that are put forward are things we do not want to do as a council. I think Councillors Carter and Firth, I think, articulated particularly well the impact on communities that cuts to councils, relentless cuts to councils, have. I know there have been comments about consultation and about the decisions that are made as a result of those consultations. I think the reality is we are consulting on bad options, things we don't want to do. And often as council leadership, we are choosing between options that we don't, where we wouldn't want to do either of those options, and we're being forced to. We've had 14 years of cuts, 2.53 billion taken from the council, and that's before inflation has significantly hit the council. I do really want to pay tribute to the officers who I think have done a phenomenal job in bringing forward an incredibly difficult budget, which, as I say, is full of things we don't want to do. If there are ways around some of these cuts, we will absolutely take them, and that's what the consultation is looking at. We've heard some suggestions to look at things like Bramley Baths. Councillor Kidger, I think you're absolutely right about the value of some of these institutions, but we have to face the cold reality of the financial position that all councils are facing at the moment, and it's just a reality of where we are.
Thank you, Councillor Pryor. Councillor Cooper, do you want to make any comment?
Thank you, Chair. And again, thank you for Scrutiny Board members and their interest and contributions around this issue of the budget. And I'm sure that we will, it's not the last we've heard of it. And Councillor Carter mentioned that I'm sure we'll have a full debate on it in Council in due course. I just do want to make a couple of points. First, on consultation, that was brought up by a number of members. And just to reassure Scrutiny that last year we did consult on car parking charges for local parks and attractions. And actually, we didn't take that forward. So, you know, when you are talking to your communities, you can really point to examples where responding to consultation and what they've said has, you know, brought about a change. And again, sometimes, you know, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So when we go to consultation and make changes, then we're told we shouldn't have bothered going to consultation in the first place and took the decision without actually going to consultation. But there you go. We are committed to consultation as an administration, and we will continue to do that. I think I'm really pleased with the responses that we've had so far for the consultation on the whole budget. As Mariana says, it is similar to previous years, and I'm pleased with the amount of people who have responded and the way that's been responded to as well. So that's really good. I do have to say that there was mention of there being easy choices and boxes ticked, and that is not the case. The situation that local councils are finding themselves, and indeed Leeds City Council with nearly £60 million to find, is unprecedented. It is not something that a position that any of us want to be in, and there is no easy choices here. I said in my introduction that many of the things in the budget are unpalatable. They're unpalatable to all of us. But when we are now in our 14th year of austerity with chronic underfunding for local government from central government, it leaves us with very few choices. And so we're facing, do we continue to provide statutory duties and non-statutory duties. And sometimes it is as basic as that we're having to make these decisions on. I think in terms of the car parking, a lot was talked about car parking. The budget there is, like we've mentioned, there is an awful lot more things in there that are not palatable as well. But in terms of the car parking, I don't know about anybody else on Scrutiny Board, but if you've ever visited another city's parks or attractions or anything, I'd be interested to know if you have not had to pay for your car parking there, because I certainly haven't visited one that's been free. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you to Victoria, Mariana, Eve and Andy, and also thank to Councillor Cooper and Councillor Pryor for answering and for the work you have done. The board will contribute to this scrutiny board report. They will be submitted to the meeting for the Executive Board on the 7th of February, setting out the views of the scrutiny on the budget for the next year. Are we happy with the recommendation on the report on page 67 of the PAC agenda? Yep. Thank you. Thank you. So we now move on to item 9, page 335, which is the 6-monthly performance report, which measures performance against key performance indicators. That falls in our board remit. Can I ask Emma or Mariana to introduce this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll do a short introduction to this report, which contains details of 21 organisational plan key performance indicators, and those are spread across 6 service areas. This report does also include 8 further off-log indicators. Those are indicators introduced by the Office for Local Government. Those all relate to financial services, so they are included at the end of that section. I understand that members previously received details of the off-log indicators in September. Their inclusion here is to formally link them into our existing reporting arrangements, as we are doing for those indicators relevant to other scrutiny boards as well. So just a couple of points I'd like to raise from this particular report then. First relates to healthy workforce, and that starts on page 341. The main results there do show a continued fall in sickness level. There is, however, disparity in the average level of sickness across council directorates, and the report does provide a breakdown of that. The report also highlights and provides a breakdown between long-term and short-term sickness, and that identifies that across the directorates, between 65 and 72% of all time lost through sickness is for long-term sickness. The other service area I particularly wanted to highlight relates to information management on governance, and that's on page 350. We do have 2 key performance indicators relating to access to information. Performance in this area remains strong, and it does show a considerable improvement over last year. And the next goal is to meet the Information Commissioner's Office target of 95% for FOI EIR requests, at which performance would be classed as good. So those are the main points I wanted to raise in relation to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma, for introducing this report. Can I ask Councillor Cooper, does she want to make a comment at this stage or after the discussion? Yeah. Councillor Amas.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, some of the stats look really good compared to the demographics in terms of the census data and what have you. However, just pinpointing one of the figures here, the workforce that we've got from June till September 2023, age 41 and over. The rest of the stats are pretty much consistent and static. However, there's a 1.6% drop within 3 months in terms of the workforce. Could you kindly shed some light on that, please?
Hi. Yes, you are right that there is a reduction there. I would have to have a look to see which parts of the service make up that particular percentage reduction, councillor. So if you can bear with me, I will just double check those figures for you.
Would that include some people having redundancies or leaving the workforce? Because obviously it's age 41 and over. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. Thank you.
Thank you. No, it won't affect the particular changes that we talked about in the last item with the leavers scheme, because that reference period doesn't include that period. It will, however, include people that have retired, because obviously we have members of staff who retire through their demographic and service all of the time. I suspect the reason for that is particular services are just seeing a larger than average increase in those who are exiting because of either sought employment elsewhere or they have retired because they've hit normal retirement age. As colleagues know, when we've looked at the demographic data, there's always quite a big variation between different services. So I'm just quite keen to drill down to find out where particular, which services, why that has happened. So if you just bear with me on that.
Thank you. Councillor Mass, do you want to come back? Okay. Councillor Bithell.
Thanks very much, Chair. In the representative workforce section, and I've said this in a few different meetings, it would be really helpful to get that compared to what banding the staff are in, because we may very well have a really effective female workforce, but actually if they're all in our lower paid, less safe activity, then that obviously isn't doing what we want it to do. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. No, that is a key piece of data for us, and we do have that, so we can certainly add this into future reports. It's no problem.
Thank you. And Councillor Bithell, do you want to come back? Happy. Next one is Councillor Burke.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of things really. One, the proportion of total long-term sickness in comparison to short-term episodes is quite substantial, isn't it? So I just wondered if there were any plans to try and support those people with long-term sickness to return to work or work in an alternative way. And one of the reasons I asked the question I did earlier, part of it was looking at the key conditions that sickness levels are attributed to. And mental health makes up over 36% of all absences. Now, I know we've had the staff welfare and well-being offers in place, but it's a worsening agenda, isn't it? So is there a plan to go back and re-examine those well-being and welfare? Because they're obviously not working effectively if the numbers are at this level. And that means people, if mental health conditions are left unaddressed, then they will worsen and ultimately have a huge impact on them as individuals and the authority.
No, thank you, Councillor Burke. No, you're absolutely right. It is a big priority for us. And as this board probably will remember, back in October, this board, we did have a presentation from myself and Lisa Culver, our Head of Health, Safety and Wellbeing. And we did very specifically pick up the mental health challenge in the workplace. So we have directed some of our resource to focus very much on that. And I won't take you through all that presentation again, because we did drill into a fair bit of detail. But obviously we have focused very much on that promotion, prevention, support model. Since we have last met, we've continued to push on that agenda. So just before Christmas, we did have a mental health first aiders conference, which our chief exec and members attended to try to again highlight some of the issues. Equally, more recently as well, we have focused more effort within our occupational health service to support staff who are suffering from mental ill health. So it is a continuing area of focus. I do agree that those figures do require us to keep focusing on it, which we will continue to do. And I think we probably have made a commitment to this scrutiny board to come back in March with a latest update. So you've heard from us in October, and we'll come back in March to let you know how things are progressing.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Chapman. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, Councillor.
Thank you. Just a question really. Is it possible, because this is up to September, I assume you collate figures on a quarterly basis. I just wondered if it was possible for us to have the figures up to December. And my other thing is the gender pay gap. That's quite worrying, isn't it? Because that's increasing, albeit marginally, but that has the potential, the gender payback, to incur huge costs for us going forward if that's not addressed.
Yeah, so we certainly do have more recent figures because we look at them on a monthly basis, so we can provide you with the most up-to-date figures. That's not a problem. And the gender pay gap, yeah, it is, the mean hourly rate has actually gone down, so it's currently at 3.8%, but just bear in mind there's always a year arrears for that figure. So the key figure will be March of this year, where we'll come back obviously to report. And obviously, if the gap does increase, then obviously we'll need to understand why and what our intervention and response to that is. I'm hopeful that it will continue to decrease because obviously we don't want any gender pay gap, but we're very close to understanding the latest figure. So obviously we'll come back and let you know.
Thank you, Andy. Can I bring in Councillor Chapman now?
Thanks, Chair. Just got two questions now. First one is just on the absence by condition. That's not got any comparator to a previous report in it. I just wondered if we could have that just to see what is, if it's improved or not. I know it says it's dead steady, but it would be good to know, like on musculoskeletal, that is something that training and education can help with. So it'd be good to know if it's going up or going down or staying the same. And the second question is just again on the gender pay gap, is when will we have the March 2023 position? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Yes, so we can certainly provide that trend analysis as described. I'm sure that will be useful for scrutiny. And the next gender pay gap figures will appear in March through the normal governance route. I can't remember which governance route it is actually. It might be up to yourself, Councillor Cooper, to determine. But it will then appear thereafter at the scrutiny board.
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Chapman, do you want to come back? No? Okay, thank you. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. To return to page 342 and sickness conditions, the points about the mental health issues is very valid and very worrying. How far do you drill down into by department, for example? There can be all sorts of reasons why members of staff are suffering from mental health conditions in this interesting world in which we live. But I wonder how far we drill down into the departmental breakdown of this and the types of mental health conditions, of which there can be very many, that are included in this very worrying figure.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Carter. Yes, so we do drill down service by service and also by reason. So we can break down when we aggregate as mental health in terms of more specific underneath that. What that will often result in, Councillor Carter, is an ability for us to undertake a risk assessment within a particular service to understand the reasons why, because obviously that's key. So understanding the level of mental ill health in a service is the first, but obviously we now need to understand the reasons for that. So we'll do the risk assessment because there can be a whole range of different factors, and then that will enable us to identify the intervention accordingly. I think, Mariana, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just to add in again on the mental health one, you're right, it is worrying, and we do spend quite a lot of time on it at leadership teams and trying to make sure that we've got the right measures and the right support. Unfortunately, though, again, it is one that it's happening in society more broadly. So we're probably no different, unfortunately, to any other employer in that sense. And we did do, and as Andy said, we are bringing a report back here again. That was a really deep dive that we did in October. And the only other thing I wanted to just mention on the reporting, we can try and improve the report that we bring. But this is a good example of workload pressure actually live happening, because we can do some work and we can try and improve comparators. But in a way, the purpose of this report is to give that kind of view across. And I think Scrutiny works really well with this. That then takes you into deep dive activity where we bring something more specific and deeper and more tailored to then enable a really good conversation at Scrutiny. I think we've done that on a few occasions, and if it's okay, we'd quite like to maintain that approach rather than pile everything into the quarterly report and then actually it gets lost in detail.
Thank you, Andy and Mariana. Councillor Carter, do you want to come back? Thank you. Next, I've got Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to start off on a positive note. I think there's been some significant progress from when we've had previous performance reports. When I've talked about in the past, as I mentioned at last meeting, about the contact centre, although there is a concern that calls have gone down by 27,000 in the period looked at, to get the figure below 5 minutes is pretty astounding compared to where we were before. Also, in terms of particular issues that I've raised about freedom of information and subject access requests, particularly on subject access requests, to see a 15% increase is quite outstanding, to say the least. I'd be interested to see how many requests individually there were, but those response rates are quite significant, and therefore I thought, given the previous scrutiny, it was very much worth noting and passing on to the directorates. I did want to raise as a specific question, given that it's been mentioned already about the 2023 figures not being included, given that this report was prepared for this month, for January 2024, is there a particular reason why, for example, the gender pay gap 2023 figure cannot be provided? And also in Appendix 1.6, opportunities to develop, there is no figure for mid-year 23-24. And I just wondered why there is any particular reason they can't be included, or should they have been, or are they mistypings on the report? Thank you.
Is it Mariana or Andy going to respond?
I think if I start, Chair, if that's okay, I'll take the last one first. In terms of the percentage of staff agree the opportunities to progress their career, I think that's probably because we haven't got a staff survey indicator as yet pulled through. And although this report is produced, ready for a January discussion, you'll appreciate that actually the process of getting reports cleared and published, actually the work for this report, if I'm correct with them, is probably done November primarily. So we do bring the latest possible information, but we are contingent on when the end of the month happens and when the relevant scrutiny is. And as you know, we're always happy to provide updated information where we've got it, or do those deep dives. So we'll keep improving where we can within the resources that we've got.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you. Just to clarify on the gender pay gap, so that always appears annually in March. That's partly because it has to be done at a snapshot. So you can only do it once per year, which we always do at the end of March, which then goes in the annual pay statement, which then goes through to council. So we can't yet provide the March figures or a figure now, because we only ever do it once per year, because that's a legal requirement to do so. So we will be doing it shortly, and then it will come back.
Thank you, Mariana. Thank you, Andy. Councillor Firth, do you want to come back?
Thank you for those explanations. I'm just a little bit concerned. Obviously, we can do it once a year. So if we do it once a financial year or once an annual year, that would still mean that we'd still be able to have a figure. And I'm just concerned that by the time we get to March, we're still then going to be reviewing the previous year's figures. And actually, every year we're now reviewing a year later, when actually, potentially, from what you're saying, unless I've misunderstood, we could actually have those figures potentially.
Thank you. Before I bring in Councillor Burke, and when we conclude this item, we will have a comfort break for 5 minutes. Councillor Burke, do you want to come in?
Sorry, I'm returning to what we were discussing earlier. Marianne, you were just talking about the collation of statistics and that's really useful. And Andy, you were saying about measures that were put in place. Could I make a suggestion? And if you already do it, feel free to say we already do that. It would be really useful, I think, when you're looking at departments, gender, ethnicity, and all the rest of it. What I'd find useful is some data on the measures that have been implemented and the impact they've had on those sickness levels. So did they work really? And do we need to go back and have another look? Because we've implemented, and I know you've implemented a lot around well-being, but are they actually working? And it's the raw data that says it works, doesn't it? Are the numbers declining? Doesn't appear to me. I apologise if that sounds particularly, it's not meant, it's just we've got a lot of people who are suffering and it'd be really nice if we could help them and get them back to work and well in themselves.
No, thank you, Councillor Burke. Yes, I mean, I guess the interventions are always very dependent on the reasons why people are suffering from ill health or other factors. So it's always quite difficult to be very explicit in terms of the impact of each individual intervention. So, for example, in this group before, we talked quite a lot about focusing a lot of effort in terms of line manager capability and confidence in terms of supporting people who are unwell. Equally, we talked about the intervention from strengthening our well-being offer and occupational health input. Likewise, a focus on focusing particularly on things like particular reasons for ill health, if that's particularly prevalent in a service. So there's a whole range of different factors. So sometimes it can be difficult to attribute each individual intervention to a positive outcome. As you know, what we have done over the last year and a half is focus very much on 12 of 13 services that have had the highest sickness absence for a whole variety of different reasons. And we can be fairly confident that that whole range of interventions I've shared have had a big impact because we've seen quite stark reductions. So it may well be useful as we progress with this, Councillor Burt, to collate this. We do provide managerial sickness absence reports to directors and chief officers, and that does include some of the analysis that you referred to. It's probably just presenting it in a format that would work for this group.
Thank you. Councillor Burke, do you want to come back?
Thank you. I am referring specifically to mental health numbers, obviously. I probably should have said that at the outset. And I just think there's some alternative things that don't cost anything or are very cheap that perhaps in the long run would reduce that and enable people to feel more supported, more able, but perhaps that's a separate conversation.
Thank you. Mariana?
Perhaps just to conclude this one, I'm really happy to take on board feedback and, you know, we can make sure that we try and do justice to the commentary in the report, maybe with linkages to where things have already been discussed to avoid duplication. And then that is one where if we're bringing back a report in March, more of a deep dive, then we can get into that conversation like we did before.
Thank you. Councillor Parham.
Yeah, just a very last word again on mental health. Basically echoing what Councillor Burke has just said, the 55,000 days is high. I think it's probably a low figure, and it's extra. You know, there's extra numbers there hidden in the musculoskeletal and the blood pressure figures. I think they're probably mental health related. As somebody who works with in suicide prevention, particularly with men. I think looking creatively, especially when we want to retain staff and we want staff to be well and healthy. I'm a little bit concerned about the figure of 76% satisfied with their line management. I'm a bit worried about that. I think it should be higher, but something like informal mental health practice, like walking together, socializing together. I don't mean down the pub, but maybe walking or something creative might be something other than just purely medical treatment, I think, to look at possibly longer term.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, absolutely. I think probably it does require a whole different types of intervention. So I've already mentioned some of them, you know, in terms of our mental health first aiders, our on-site counselling, and support for managers. But you are right, the more informal can also be quite important for services. So we do encourage individual teams, managers and the like to consider more localised interventions, whether that's in their workplace. And you know, the focus therefore is that be your best offer for managers, because I think the key trick with this is supporting our managers to support their workforce, particularly in mental ill health. But obviously we were very keen to explore a whole range of different ideas. It is a work in progress. We covered some of these back in October and we'll come back in March. So we'll keep listening to any other ideas or suggestions to help us strengthen that offer. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to come back? Oh, thank you. Before I conclude this item, Councillor Cooper, do you want to comment on this?
Oh dear, are you okay? Yeah, just to thank officers for bringing together this report, as well as has been mentioned earlier in the meeting. You know, there are ever increasing workloads for officers, so for them to bring the detail, I'm really pleased to see, and thank you for that. I think there's a number of issues that's been raised, and we are committed to bringing that gender pay gap down continuously, and I hope to see that the end of the year figures will bring an improvement around that. I also just want to touch on the issue, because it's been discussed quite by a number of people, is the mental health issues that have been raised. And you have to remember that the figures that we are providing are the figures where members of staff have actually identified as having a mental health issue. There are, for me, there are two sides for this. There's everybody's mental, good mental well-being that we need to be thinking about as an organisation, and for all of those people that work with us, and how we generally go about, you know, ensuring that people maintain good mental health well-being. But then there's a separate issue for me, and a particular one, where we've got staff who have identified with mental health issues that we need to address that. And Councillor Burt's quite right to raise it as a matter in scrutiny, with the percentage of people actually identifying as it is something of a concern. And I'm happy to pick up outside of scrutiny with any member who wants to, on the whole raft of work that we're doing as a organisation and HR department with Andy on addressing those members of staff and helping and assisting as and where we can. But there are also, we need to also think about it in terms of work-related and not non-work related mental health issues as well. It's a very complex area, as I'm sure you're all very fully aware of, but I'm very happy to pick up outside of scrutiny. If anybody, Chair, wants to pick it up with me, please, if you email me, I'll meet up with you and we can discuss this further.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper, for those response and for the comments. And members, Councillor Cooper's doors are always open. And if you've got any issues or concerns, you can just approach her as well. Thank you. Can I take this opportunity to say thank you to Emma, Andy and Mariana for responding to the questions. Thank you for the comments and questions. Are we happy with the recommendation in the report on page 335 on our PAC agenda? Yep. Thank you. So we will break up for a comfort break for 5 minutes, So we should be back here for 12:05. Thank you. Welcome to Strategy and Resources Scrutiny meeting after our comfort break. We now move to agenda item number 10, page 353, which is the Best City Ambition for 2024 update. This follows an item we considered in October 2023, which introduced some of the main aims of the updates. And we can now consider the final draft of that work. As we all know, the Best City Ambition is the council's main overall strategy plan. I understand that Mike's got some presentation to accompany this afternoon. So over to you, Mike.
Thanks very much, Chair. Hi, everyone. Yeah, not loads of slides to run you through today, and I won't tread over the ground we covered in October. So if you could skip on another slide, please. So just a reminder on screen there of what the Best City Ambition is, which the Chair just covered. So if we go to the next one, please, Rob. Thank you. So just as a way of introduction and context setting, this is the process that we've been going through, really. And as you see on screen there, it really kicked off early on with a discussion with the board in October last year to set the scope for this update of the Best City Ambition. And acting on the comments we received then and a range of other discussion and engagement that's been going on throughout, some of which is detailed on the screen at the bottom there in terms of some of the groups we've gone and talked to. We took initial proposals for an updated version of the Best City Ambition to Exec Board in December, and that's what the bulk of the paperwork you've got for this meeting covers. Really, it's a copy of that Exec Board report and a copy of the draft ambition. That has since gone out to formal public consultation alongside the budget. So really, really great to be able to tap into that 1,700 or so responses we've had to inform the next ambition as well. And just to stress that public consultation has come after a huge amount of more informal engagement, some of which has included members of the general public. So it's sort of this twin track process that we've gone through. As a result of that, the early and we're still working through the detail, but the early findings from that public consultation are showing broad support for the content of the ambition, with only relatively minor points for us to act further upon, and we'll detail where we've done that in the next report to Exec Board. But I think I'm taking real positives from that in terms of the strength of the engagement that took place before we even went out to formal public consultation. And we're coming back to you today, one, to check in on the work that we've done with you, but there is a more formal purpose to this meeting as well, which is because the Best City Ambition is part of the Council's budget and policy framework, it's subject to its own consultation and approval processes, of which a meeting with yourselves is a formal part. And any comments that you make today will be fed through to the Executive Board as part of the final report that will go to them in February. Assuming Exec Board endorses that proposal, it'll then come to you again at full council for approval. So really briefly, just want to touch on the changes we've made, really, and the focus on the two key parts of the ambition, which you'll be familiar with. Very much leads with team leads and our team leads approach, so how we want to work as a city, before moving on to the priorities that we set around those three pillars. So what you can see on screen here is a new version of the principles and the description of team leads. There's a lot of consistency here with what was, sorry, Rob, you just, there is a lot of consistency here with what's in the current version of the Best City Ambition. But what we've tried to do is put it in slightly more human language, dare I say, in places. Some of the feedback we had was, this is all the right stuff, but it only makes sense if you know what you're talking about and you know some of the jargon. So we've tried wherever we can to take that out and make it really plain English. We've also strengthened some of the key concepts in here as well. So that we've put more in there about working in a sort of strength-based way, working with people on their priorities. And the previous content around co-production and co-design has been strengthened further to fully embrace the idea of community power, which is really central to lots of the brilliant work that the council and partners do in the city around things like asset-based community development, one of the key sort of building blocks of that. We've also, again, tried to frame it around things like having a healthy society, being good neighbours, leading with kindness and looking out for one another, which in some ways takes us right back to where we started with the Best City Ambition after the pandemic and seeing lots of that brilliant work in the city. And this is really an attempt to capture some of that. If you could move on, please, Rob. So for each of the three pillars of health and wellbeing, inclusive growth and zero carbon, what we've then done is just check and challenge ourselves on those priorities. So again, there is lots of consistency here, but we do, recognise the financial challenge that we've got, recognising the challenges that partners have got. It's even more important we're sort of laser focused on the things that we think will make the most difference. So each of the three sort of vision statements, if you like, have been updated here. Largely to reflect the new inclusive growth and health and wellbeing strategies. And I won't read it out. You can read on screen and in the papers pack what the full detail is. And then what I've captured on the slides is, I guess, an interpretation, a high level summary of what the 5 priorities under each one are. There is more detail in each of these points in the report. But for health and wellbeing, we're talking very much about, the best start, promoting a mentally healthy city, picking up things that you've talked about already this morning. Maintaining that principle of the importance of access to green space for mental health and for leisure and active lives. The challenges that we know we've got in the city around the quality of housing, and a lot of brilliant work that does go on, but where we think we can probably continue to do that and grow it where possible. And then providing equal access to essential services as well. Moving on to inclusive growth. Again here, real focus on education and skills. So across the first 2 points, that's both from the perspective of people in the city having really good quality education and skills that can support them to access a good quality job and career progression, but also from the economy's perspective and from what what businesses need and access to those skills, so that Leeds is a place that we're attracting growing businesses that are creating good jobs for the benefit of local people and communities. Recognising the ongoing importance of investment in infrastructure, not least transport. And then the focus on, I suppose, the innovation agenda and how we position Leeds nationally and internationally to attract talent, to attract investment is captured in here too. Really key aspects of the inclusive growth strategy. And then finally on climate change. So we've revised the sort of vision here, if you like. So Leeds aiming to become the first net zero city in the UK, which is a big and very bold statement, but one that I know a huge amount of work is going on to try and achieve. And relatively recently, Leeds has again been graded A by the Carbon Disclosure Project. So one of only a small number of global cities to achieve that ranking. So a good endorsement of the progress that we're making. And then again, key priorities here around transport, active travel, low carbon transport, the importance of access to a good, healthy diet and local growing and vibrant food economy. There's another housing aspect here. So we talk more generally about housing quality under health and wellbeing and the health impacts, but there's clearly a massive environmental impact of getting that right too. And then one thing we've strengthened throughout the ambition this time is the importance of nature and biodiversity. As a member of the public put it to me, quite candidly, there's no point reducing carbon if all the bees are dead. Which sort of captured the twin track things that we need to. Yes, we absolutely need to reduce carbon emissions, but we need to protect wildlife and biodiversity as well. Thanks, Rob. Next slide, please. I've talked to all of you about this at community committees, so I'm not going to dwell on it. But as you know, one of the things that we did, the very detailed discussions we had a couple of years ago at community committees was around the approach to monitoring progress and feedback, really strong feedback from members that wasn't strong enough at that point. So a huge amount of work has gone in, and we're now proposing to move forward exactly as discussed at community committees with two key aspects to how we will monitor our progress. The first being use of the Leeds Social Progress Index, which I'm sure everyone has now had the opportunity to have a look at because I've been and shown you it myself. And the second is around community voice, and data's brilliant, but all data exists within a context, and the best way to get that context is by talking to people. So we've got loads of routes in the city already and opportunities to strengthen them further through things like the community committee review that's ongoing, for having really meaningful conversations with residents and businesses and communities that will be key to assessing how we do against the Best City Ambition. And then I think finally, Yeah, so just wanted to sort of talk about a little bit about where next, I suppose, because when we brought the ambition to you a couple of years ago, we had a range of further development work to do around things like measuring progress. I guess how we see it now is it's about continuing to promote the ambition in the city, outside the city, using it to attract investment and inform the discussions we have with government and others, continuing to work with other organisations in the city to embed this within their own organisational strategies. And it's a bit sad, but it is brilliant to see sometimes, cities proactively without organisations proactively without us prompting them start talking about the best city ambition. And we heard some of that through the peer review in 2022 as well. So continuing on with that, using it to set the context for our work. And the best city ambition has been used to set the context for the ongoing financial challenge, but the community committee review and our comms work as well. And using it to frame conversations in the city with partner organisations. So that's what's been brilliant about the engagement exercise we've done to inform this update is we've had that opportunity to sit down with community committees and colleagues across the council, but also with residents and communities and businesses about how they see this and where they think they can contribute. And we'll keep all of this under review and actively monitor our progress and performance towards the goals that we've set as well. I think that's me done, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike, for the presentation and also going through the report. And thank you, Rob, for operating the slides as well. Before I bring in the board members for questions or comments, does Councillor Cooper want to wait till the end of the discussion, or does she want to make it now? Comments?
I'll say now, Chair, I stayed on for the discussion for this, but it's not actually my area. It's the leaders' portfolio. Is the best city ambition. So, but I'm happy to kind of answer anything that I may have some knowledge of, but it's not my particular area.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Any questions or comments from the board members? Councillor Bithell?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's a comment rather than a question. And I guess it's just on page 373, where it talks about team leads in action. I just think it's worth highlighting how incredible it is that this sort of work is still going on, given all of the discussions that we've had for the last 2 hours around the budget, and about how effectively we work across the city with our partner organisations, which you mentioned. So I just wanted to use my comment to highlight that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Just to come back, I mean, I absolutely agree. And just to say, one of the reasons we're taking the approach to that section and linking to a better way of approaching sort of case studies and sharing that information is hopefully, even in a really challenging financial context, where brilliant things are happening in pockets, that can give us a route to sharing them more broadly so that we can learn from each other to help tackle some of those challenges as well.
Councillor Bithell, do you want to come back? That's fine. Councillor Kitchener.
Yes, I would like to mirror what Councillor Bithell said. The bad news that you hear all around about Birmingham and other councils and what have you. And yes, we know that the budgets have to be, and I think, yes, you might not agree with them. Yes, you will agree with them. But I think we are holding our head up there. We are making our city big and important. And I just think it's hard. I'd hate to think I'm not an accountant, far from, but it must be so hard to balance the books. And I think it's been a real good effort to what they've done. It really is. And I'm just proud to be a Leeds City Councillor.
Thank you. Anybody else? Nope. Councillor Burke.
Just echo what my colleague says, but I've got a question, surprisingly. It's just about the innovation arc. And we're talking once again about co-production, which is the latest buzzword, isn't it? And lots of things that we say, and I mean the royal we, I don't mean the council, are co-produced, are absolutely not. we just listen to people and then ignore what they have said. So when you look at the list of people who'll be involved in the Innovation Act, the third sector seems to be a very obvious omission from that, because quite often the third sector has links into communities that it's a Carling effect, isn't it? They go places where nobody else can. I just wondered if that was a intentional omission or it's just an omission. Thank you.
It's certainly not an intentional omission. I'm happy to sort of pick up with Eve and colleagues about how we articulate the range of partners that either are currently engaged or will be involved in the future in the development of the innovation arc, and make sure that's accurately reflected.
Thank you, Mike. You're fine. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for those comments and questions. Are we happy with the recommendation in the report on page 353? Yep. Thank you. So we move on to agenda item 11, page 375, which is the work programme. Guests are welcome to stay to hear the discussions, but if you are not, thank you for attending today. Thank you. Rob, do you want to introduce this report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Relatively briefly then, so the work programme is presented Appendix 1 for the remainder of the 2023-24 municipal year. To note in discussion from today, there was talk of a further update on staff wellbeing, mental health, so that would, for March, so we'd need to shuffle that work programme, Chair, potentially to include, or certainly you and I would need to discuss that and come back to the board. In terms of other things to note, we did agree last time that financial health would feature on the work programme once again, or rather financial reporting as it's now known. So that's programmed for March. And we have a site visit to the Council's contact centre, which was the subject of a really interesting update report last time. That is taking place on the 31st of January at 9:30 a.m. That's everything from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. That brings me to the end of today's business. Thank you all for your contribution, and I look forward to the next meeting on the 19th of February at 10 a.m. and with, as usual, pre-meeting at 9:30 a.m. Thank you all for your attendance, and I will now conclude the meeting. Thank you. Have a lovely day. Thank you.